Well, welcome. You heard our little chatting beforehand. Welcome to our church development webinar on preparing for a fall, annual, and/or capital campaign. This is Denis Greene. I'm Meredith Snyder. I help with tech and marketing church development, and we've been running these webinars, trying to stay involved with you guys in your ministry and help support you in what you're trying to do in this time of social distancing in the church. And hopefully we'll be getting back to worship services within the next couple weeks, depending on where you are. So today's webinar topic, we're just going to be talking about preparing for the fall. Some of you are preparing for capital campaigns. A lot of you are going to be doing your annual campaigns, and there are some special things that we recommend thinking about in general, and then also talking about what that might look like now that we've just been through and we're still in this time of unique distancing and ministries that we are just starting for the first time. So hopefully have some new things to share with you guys and some things that are the tried and true foundations of stewardship. So I'd like to welcome Denis Greene, our presenter today, President of Church Development, and take it away.
Thank you very much, Meredith, and thank you everybody for joining us. These have really turned out to be a very fun part of my work life, and part of my joy is sharing what I have learned. So I've been doing this for more than 25 years, and I've helped more than 200 churches in their capital campaign and hundreds more in their annual campaigns. So that means I've raised somewhere around $1 billion, and it's really been fun. And I'm still connected with all the churches that I have served, so I'm continually learning from them. And one of the things I just started to see this week is churches are starting to schedule their reopening of worship services, and one has a sign-up genius. So they're only going to let so many people in to accommodate social distancing. So that's something for you to think about. Now, please do ask questions as we go. You've got that chat box. Anything is fair game. And I come to you, since '92, I've just been working with churches. But before that, for 8-9 years before that, I worked in the secular world and just pure fundraising for all kinds of nonprofit organizations. And I'm still reading and learning everything I can from the secular world. The Association of Fundraising Professionals gives me weekly education. And I take from them to share with you, as I do take from the corporate world as well. So these 8 topics should get you a 10% increase in your annual campaign. And if you're preparing for a capital campaign at any point in the future, these 8 topics will help you enormously. And sometimes I'm going to deviate my view from looking at you to looking over here at my other screen to see what's coming up next. And I'll try not to be too distracted. I had that experience the other day. I was on the road. I went into a McDonald's. I was behind the glass. I made my order, and then I stepped over to the left. And I have allergies. I'm allergic to tree pollen. And as I stepped over there, I realized I'm about to cough. And there were 6 truck drivers behind me. And I thought to myself, if I cough, I might be the recipient of some serious disdain. So that's when my years of swimming practice kicked in. So I just held my breath. I'm sure I was turning blue by the time I got my coffee and biscuit and left that place. So anyway, long story, forgive me if I'm a little bit distracted by looking over here. And I will also be looking at the chat box as well, looking for your questions and comments. So number 1, I want to give you the theory, which comes from our 26 years, 27 years of serving churches. Why do people give generously? And that'll set the context for everything that follows. We'll talk about your segments, and this is kind of a secular topic. This is what's talked about in typical nonprofit fundraising. You do have groups, and they have different attitudes, and do not treat everybody the same. Because if you do, the person who's reading or listening, they'll ask themselves, don't they know who I am and what I'm all about? So you have to really be sensitive, and it's going to take a little extra effort on your part, but you'll get gigantic benefits. We expect a 10% increase per year, and most of the time we exceed that. Item 3, you've got to get your act together, get the details under control. Number 4, your communication system has changed, and we have a new normal, and we're never going back. So how do we accommodate this, the new normal, which is video, Zoom, text, and the online? We had better get our game on. If you're doing a capital campaign, number 5 is for you. A feasibility study is the survey in advance. Number 6, we'll talk about the calendar, what to do starting today. Number 7, there is a best way to do a pledge card, and I'll give you a pretty good example. And number 8, I want to touch on online giving, because you have to have easy options so your members and visitors can go there and just with a click make a gift without revealing all of their sensitive information. That's what's very important. Okay, next slides. This is a Zoom webinar. Please ask your questions or just chime in if you've got a good example. I'm just going to ask you what's going on with you. Well, let me ask you a question right now. How many of you are experiencing a dip in annual giving right now? And when you respond, could you tell me approximately how much you are down? Most of us have a little bit of a dip, but I'm very happy to report that that we're not all tanking. We're not all down by 50%. Okay, so here's a response. We're starting to schedule our major gift solicitations. Yay, for our building campaign. Great. Pivoted to focus online giving for offertory. Awesome, you've recovered 90% of your weekly budget. Yay, this is really good news. Okay, tell me more. Other webinar participants, let me know, how are you doing and what percent are you down if you're down, and if you're up, let me know as well. Now, we'll send you a link to this recording afterwards. Just give me a shout and let me know if you would like that. Okay, here's my email address. Call me anytime. That's my phone number. I'll send you these slides so you'll have my phone number. Our mission is to increase generosity without fundraising, and by golly, we've been a success. So we proceed in a manner that's very different from other fundraising capital campaign consultants. Our passion is stewardship, and our laboratory is capital campaigns. So we have just learned a whole lot from doing those capital campaigns. We're a little different because we proceed based in faith and reason. So we rely a lot. I mean, we're in this business because of our faith lives, but we rely a lot on the behavioral economics and what's the corporate world doing? What can we learn from, and what can we not do that they do badly? For us, when we do a capital campaign, the ask is based in prayer and not pressure, and that makes it very appealing to both the pastors and the people making the donations. We stick with you for 3 years after the capital campaign to make sure your annual giving continues to increase. And we also will help you start a planned giving effort in that 3-year period after a capital campaign. And we usually raise as much in planned giving as we do in the capital campaign as well. My favorite, 1 Peter 4:10. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. So I love that. It's kind of a career counseling quote. Figure out how God has blessed you, and now figure out how to be a conduit for God's blessing. That is some real interesting research in the secular world. There's an author named Seligman, a psychologist, who wrote the book Flourish, and it was really meant to be an extension of the book and research titled Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, which was based upon Abraham Maslow's tenets of well-being. You remember the hierarchy of needs? And in that, he discovered that people who are generous, it's very interesting, they live longer and their immune system is healthier as well. Actually, the T cell production in our immune system increases the minute we give more than 2% of our income away to charity. Isn't that fascinating? So there is some really good scientific research that says abiding by this scripture will make you live longer and be happier. So in that way, I've come to think of us as being a servant to our members. And it's not an us versus them, but it's us together seeking the will of God. And by golly, giving seems to be really good for you. Now, to balance that out, we borrow a lot from behavioral economics. And my favorite author and researcher is Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He won a Nobel Prize, and he talks about how System 1, our instincts are very fast, but not rational. They're intuitive. It's very different from our prefrontal cortex, which is very slow and rational and kind of like a calculator. And so to understand how those two different parts of the brain work is very important for you as you seek to serve your people. So I'll incorporate both of those as we proceed. So now this is a picture of me, and they whited out all the blemishes and then made my hair a little darker and put a tie on me. Anyway, I've been doing this forever, and I'm such a nerd. See that bottom line? I was even part of academic research on how people think related to this subject. So I'm a nerd. My wife tells me I can go 0 to boring in 2.7 seconds. But people who are nerds of a feather stick together. Okay, so here's our agenda. Why do people give generously to their church? What are your segments? Let's think about each one of these differently. We'll talk about the mailing details. We'll cover the communication system. We'll talk about what's a feasibility study look like. We'll give you the big chunks in the calendar and the pledge card, which you can have a pledge card if you do a capital campaign for both your annual and capital on the same pledge card. And we'll talk about annual giving as well. Or probably online giving, making that easy. So here are the 7 components of the stewardship system that are based in research. People have got to understand 1 Peter 4:10. They need to pray and discern God's will in their life. And when they do that, only 5% of the population does tithe. But the minute they understand stewardship and live a life of discernment, their giving goes way up. And we also know they will grow closer to God when they're seeking God's will in their life. So to facilitate that is just super important. We know that when somebody's involved in a decision, they're going to give because it's their decision. We know that social connection is kind of like a binary switch. Either they know the people involved or they don't know them. And if they know them and they're connected to them, they will give generously. And number 5 is, I'm going to say magic bullet. I should never say magic. But if someone is an active volunteer in the ministries of the church, or better in your capital campaign, if you're doing a capital campaign, their giving will be 11 times higher than those who were not volunteers. Isn't that mind-boggling? 11 times, 1,100%. And that's something to take note of. So how might we think about engaging people as volunteers? Good question. Number 6, you have to be asked. Everyone has to be asked. They have to know now is the time to give. And we will take the way we ask from the research presented by Charles Zeck in his book, Why Catholics Don't Give. And in that, it's a failure analysis. It's reverse engineering. Why are Catholics the least generous among all the mainline denominations? And when I say least, the average Catholic gives 1.2% of their income to the church. The average Protestant gives 2.2%. What's that tell you? We have room to grow. The ask that Zeck has discovered works best is based on a percentage ask and not a dollar ask. And that applies for people who are kind of in the middle strata and larger in your giving paradigm. At the bottom sector, there is a number that's an industry norm, and that is $20. People feel very comfortable. That's the national average for giving per week for people who attend church. And I think that's because we all carry a $20 bill in our pocket. Not, at least some of us carry a $20 bill. Some people carry no cash now. But at the bottom strata, your new donors, your non-donors, $20 is kind of what they're comfortable with. Your better donors, we want to present a percentage ask. Number 7, thank. It really does help to thank people in preparation for their next request. So they immediately think back, well, what did you do with my last donation? Did you even acknowledge it? Did I have an impact with my giving? Do you care about me at all? And a lot of people, when we were very vigorous in our capital campaign, thank you, a lot of people just they're mad because the gift wasn't even acknowledged. And it's mind-boggling to me how we could make such a mistake.
Dennis, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Sure.
So it looks like, just looking at a couple people chiming in from the chat, a lot of folks are on budget for their annual giving, either from special appeals that they've sent out or because they've been able to balance the budget by making some cuts in spending. And so that's really, really good success considering what we have been through in the past 6 or 7 or 8 weeks. So maybe if you could just talk as you're going through these different principles about how folks can maintain the momentum that that they've gained by doing a special appeal, how they've engaged their members through asking during this unique time, and how people have been involved in live streaming, and how they can keep that engagement throughout the year until they're ready for their campaign in the fall.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that up, and please do interrupt with other questions and concerns and directions as we go. And I welcome you listeners as well to do that in the chat box. I might have to lean in and squint to better read that. But you have this golden opportunity right now because everybody knows something just happened. Life is not different. The numbers that people report to me of their broadcasts, their online broadcasts, of their worship attendance, most people have experienced dramatic increases. One of my favorite churches I've ever worked with my whole life, Pastor Jeffrey Ott in Atlanta. He's just the neatest guy, the dynamic, charismatic personality, and really a fun, likable person. He's right in the middle of it this second, and we were working on it this morning. And he's gearing up for his annual campaign. And we legitimately can say our numbers are way up. Our way of doing ministry is dramatically different, and it's probably going to be dramatically different for a long time. So he has a legitimate right now to say, please make a special gift. Please elevate your giving because we have a new normal. We've got to reinvent ourselves, and we have to do it right this very second. So please make a stretch gift. So everybody listening to this needs to do that in their next solicitation. We need to make this shift right now. So thank you for that question, Meredith, and please ask away as we go. Number one in how to increase generosity is teaching stewardship. The best method is lay speakers. 3 minutes, it could be done by video or at the end of worship, but at this point, everything's going to be video. And it's great because a person can use their own little cell phone. They can make as many takes as they want, but it's really got to be limited to 3 minutes. There are 3 questions. Number one, how has God blessed you? Number two, how do God's blessings flow through you? So in other words, what do you give to? What do you volunteer for? And then number 3, how did your life change when you realized that the purpose of your life is to be a conduit for God's blessings and to share generously that which God has shared with you? Your best speakers are lay speakers like this person portrayed here. Please do it once per month. Okay, next slide. Prayer and discernment. Prayer-based decisions are better. So seeking God's will, setting aside a time of prayer and discernment works. One of the best things we do, St. Andrew's Episcopal, one of my favorite churches, Father John Spicer, a really neat guy. They're launching, their board is launching an effort to listen to every member with a 1-question survey. What might I pray for on your behalf? When we did this with a church in Long Island, giving went up 16% after this singular survey. Now, one of our best things that I can send you if you're interested is a 2-week prayer guide. And I usually have one here right on my desk. I wish I had it, but it's a prayer and discernment guide in advance of making the pledge decision. You do this, giving goes up. Number 3, involvement in decision making. So figure out a way to do this. We may not be able to do town hall meetings in person, but we can do SurveyMonkey. We can do Zoom. When life resumes, you can have lunches with the pastor right after worship. You can have task forces. Find a way to engage people. All right, number 4, connecting people socially. This is fascinating. Now, this comes from the research on influence and persuasion, and the author's name is Denis. And he has 6 criteria reciprocity, urgency, social proof, the likability of the person doing the asking, the authority, and congruence with values, RUSLAV. And the 30-second summary of a heck of a lot of research. But the social proof ranks very highly. Now, this diagram you're looking at comes from Gallup polling. They analyzed thousands of churches, and they found that only about 15% of your people are highly involved. About 50% could be more involved. They're kind of waiting for that personal invitation. And 35% maybe Christmas and Easter only. My wife calls them CEOs. And so I'm bummed out that people, the church is hemorrhaging members. So what do? We've got to connect people socially. So they define their community as their church. I am one strand in the fabric, in the tapestry of this community. Now, another interesting thing that Gallup polling discovered is that there's a slice across all members that will disagree with just about everything that you bring up, and they gave them the title CAVE, C-A-V-E, which stands for consistently against virtually everything. So my church has it, your church probably has it. Don't be offended. That's just how their brains work. It's only about 1% of the population. Anyway, the larger point here is engage people socially. Okay, find ways for small groups, discussion groups, make them, always have donuts and coffee after worship so people hang around and just chat. Connecting people socially is a precursor, a predecessor to generosity. And you hear donuts, I know they're horrible for you, but they're really good for connecting people socially. You do potluck dinner ministry. Best practices, have a vigorous welcoming ministry. Okay. Have lots of fellowship, have branding that supports your community. Number 5, the big one, going back to the Gallup polling, 15%, maybe it's 20% of your people do probably 80% of the volunteering. Well, design something for the outer 80 or 85%. Create episodic volunteer opportunities, one and done, just so a person, if they got an hour on a Saturday or a Sunday after church or a Tuesday night, create opportunities for them to get involved. A more advanced topic would be spiritual gifts, figuring out what has God blessed you with. But bottom line, the best thing is episodic volunteer projects. Number 6, do an ask based on prayer, not pressure. So we want to invite them just to consider, prayerfully consider giving. And the rule of thumb is that we're going to do 4 asks per year. We're going to have an annual campaign every year. I know half the people listening don't do an annual campaign. That's our statistic in the church. Well, please do one every single year on the same day. And you can do a capital ask every single year. Just people, we have this particular need where the carpet or the boiler or the roof. Some people only want to give the capital ask. That's fine. Do one every year. You can do a capital campaign every 5 years, and there is absolutely no downside. We usually raise 2.5 to 3 times annual giving. So if your annual budget every year is $1 million, we're going to raise $2.5 to $3 million, and it's very predictable. It's just we have more than 100 churches that we've done that for, and some are a lot more than that. We recently completed a campaign in which we raised 7 times annual giving. But anyway, you can do a capital campaign every 5 years with no downside. My church, where I go, we did 4 in a row. We rebuilt the church. So we had 4 3-year campaigns stacked end to end to end. And we basically doubled giving across 12 years. You're allowed to do an emergency ask, so please do one. And the joke in our world is plan your emergency out well in advance. So you're allowed an emergency ask, so plan one out every year. And then you've got your year-end Christmas gift. And a lot of times, if we do a good job, we'll raise 10% of all the money raised in the course of a year on the Christmas ask. So take that seriously. Pledge card, here's a sample pledge card. It works. Have a pledge card. We'll cover more of that later. Thank people. Okay, the inner 15% may not need much thanking, but boy, the outer really does. They need a lot of thanking. It even helps thank them on a regular basis. Have somebody to just write thank you notes. Over on your right, that's my favorite thank you gift, the Christmas tree ornament. You can do that ornament right there for $6. People love it. Okay, so now let's shift gears to the next part of the agenda, the saints. Okay, that's your segment from whom you will receive the majority of your funds raised. This fall at the International Catholic Stewardship Council, I'm presenting a workshop on how to engage that top strata of donors. And just the easiest way for you to think about it is you probably have 10 donors that give dramatically more than everybody else. You've got a total of 100 donors that might give you 80%, might give you 90% of all the funds that you raise. So just my super pragmatic advice is know who they are, know their names, engage them, ask for their input, meet up for coffee or dinner, but just find a way to connect with them. It's just, they're that top strata, they're just like you or me. They just have a little bit more money. We got to treat them with respect and engage them. The ACH donors, there's obviously going to be overlap between your top 100 and your electronic fund transfer donors. And we want everybody to be an electronic fund transfer donor. The downside is they tend to not increase. They tend to lock in and then not renew. So our year end, our pledge campaign really should ask for an increase. And it should be super easy. It should be check a box. And it's real. So once they're locked in as an electronic fund transfer donor, the plus side is they don't drop off. The downside is they tend to not increase. So we've got to be super deliberate. Your third segment is your envelope donors who actually write a check, which is shrinking, and it should shrink. We want everybody to be an electronic fund transfer donor, and we want them to do it right now. Some people are just locked into that, so we've got to figure out a way to do it. I had a church, a really beautiful church. They started a club that just says if you are an automated recurring giver, we're going to have a special party for you every year, and we're going to do this, and you're going to get a gift. And it seemed to work. So they were way ahead of the curve. They started this about 10 years ago, and they leaped up to 70% of their congregants were locked in for online early on. So we want everybody to do that. Now, if you're like other churches, your fourth segment is your non-donors. And I'm going to lump new in there, and you could split those apart if you wanted to. But your non-donors, these are the folks where you've got to be kind of suggestive of an amount. And maybe you start with $20 a month, maybe you start with $20 a week, but make it something easy and doable. For them, don't ever say the word tithing. They consider that a tax. Just think, maybe you want to throw out 2%. That's something to consider. Believe it or not, we have a lot of trouble with database. Names and addresses, and that's kind of the old standard. At this point, we really have got to get everybody's phone. So a lot of churches have about half their members' phone numbers. Oh, good golly, that's the big one. Apparently 25%, according to some marketing in the corporate world statistic, 25% of emails change every year. So just build into your process as you're gearing up for your annual campaign or your capital campaign this fall, do some kind of census, do some kind of survey to collect any corrections, okay? And the big focus has got to be on email and phone numbers, okay? Because you're going to be texting in the near future. And you're going to text to engage. At some point in the near future, you're going to have an app just for your church. So that's on the front page of everybody's phone. They can just punch that app and pop up. Here's what's going on in church today. And there's always got to be a button on the app that asks for their input backwards. Okay, so it's got to be information out, input back. So start working right now on your database for your fall campaign. Okay, and it's going to take you a month, and you're going to have to offer incentives to collect all those things. Now, your communication system is different with the new normal. Forgive me, I've got a little allergy. We're going to do the normal stuff: mailing letter, brochure, pledge card, return envelope. You got to do that. That's just the normal stuff, and it's going to be that way for a while. You got to replicate everything that you mail out through email. So, and it's going to be kind of weird too. So your letter has to be in the body, and it's apparently okay if you have an email that has a letter, but the minute they've got to scroll and click to download and open something, you lose them. So have your letter, then have your brochure, just so I can scroll down and see the brochure. And then I can scroll down and I can then click on something to take me to my pledge if I'm going to make my pledge online. So scrolling is okay. Opening documents, and I would say preserve that only for your pledge device, okay? I recommend this third bullet, the annual report. I recommend that you do that, and you create that with one message in mind. Where did my donation go? What impact, what human impact did my gift have on the world? The last thing that is appealing is a line item budget. That's super boring. Don't talk about that. Talk about how many baptisms, how many funerals, how many marriages, how many kids were active, how many children, how many people were new to join the church, how many adult education and formation activities. And tell stories in each one of those, because that's the human impact. So do an annual report, even if it's just 2 pages, so that people know, where did my money go? The new normal is to do a video. Plan on this for a long time, where your pastor just sits and stares at the camera and tells stories about what's happening. The old rule of thumb was you could not have a video that was more than 3 minutes. And if it was a mundane topic, 1 minute was your limit. But boy, now all bets are off. People are willing to listen to a 45-minute fireside chat from their pastor. So take advantage of that. So something just happened with the pandemic. All of a sudden, maybe it's because of our overdosing on television now, but if it's their church and if it's engaging, they'll sit still for a long video. You can also use this for your lay speaker. You can also use this for your ask. Matter of fact, I'm going to recommend that your ask is done on video, and then you email it out. And I have my favorite service. It's called BombBomb, B-O-M-B. Costs about $30 a month. It allows you to tailor a video that you send out to somebody. So literally, I could send Meredith a video that says, "Hi, Meredith, wish I could be there with you and Michael and ask you in person to support the church in our upcoming annual campaign. Since I can't, please consider this my request that you prayerfully discern God's will in your life and you join us with a pledge, a weekly gift for the campaign ahead." So I could do a tailored ask in 30 seconds. That means 2 a minute. That means I could do my top 100 in 50 minutes. You might think about that. At a minimum, do a generic ask video that goes out to everybody from your pastor. Now, your website has got to be modified during your annual campaign season. It's got to be a button up here that says, click here for more information. Click here to make a pledge to our annual campaign. Click here to see our annual campaign brochure. So those got to be on your website so people know where to go to get it in case they've lost the email. The new normal includes text. 98% of all texts are open within 30 seconds. So gear up to be doing texts to your people. Text with links, okay? And during the annual campaign, I say send 1 a week. Okay? And annual or capital campaign, 1 a week. Be judicious in how you do that, but people like it, and some people just live on text, like my kids. Social media and text, they don't answer their phones anymore. If you're going to do a capital campaign, do a feasibility study, okay? It's like an X-ray before surgery or an MRI. It's just really a best practice. It takes about 6 weeks, costs about $14,000. You interview folks, you send a survey out to everybody. You ask them, what do you think about the project that we're planning? How do you feel? Would you like to volunteer? We ask them about 17 different questions, and we ask the money question, would you support this financially? And from that, we've got a 70-page report, that really clearly outlines how we should proceed. A real tailored plan comes out of that. It also tells you how much can we raise. And that's real important when you set a goal, because if you've got a $12 million building and your annual giving is only $1 million per year, well, you be kind of careful there. Don't set up an expectation that if we don't raise $12 million, we're a failure. No, you want to present the whole enchilada, but then you got to say a realistic goal for this campaign is $2.5 million, and we will declare success at that point. So I've observed that failure numerous times, and that really kind of stings. So be careful about that. That last bullet is the most important thing. What potential problems might we encounter during our campaign? And if you're about to raise $12 million, it's worth $14,000 to just avoid potential problems, because that's a lot of money on a percentage basis. $14,000 is a very tiny percent of your overall goal, and boy, does it help avoid problems. And I've experienced numerous disasters, as you can imagine, and I try to avoid making the same mistake twice. So feasibility study, that's the best practice, absolutely. I'm going to lump the calendar into these steps, and it could be 3 pages long, but here are the chunks that you've got to do. So right now, today, identify who are your top 10 donors and your top 100 donors. And you, whether you're the pastor, the business administrator, or the finance and stewardship person, you really need to know who they are. And then you need to know their name and let your pastor know and your leaders know and say, well, these are our top 100. We want to make sure that they are fully engaged and informed so they are not surprised. And we want to offer the same things to virtually everybody. Everybody gets the same information, and it's spread out for everyone to see. But please pay a little extra attention to your top 10 and your top 100. It makes a big difference. And it just, the socioeconomic stratification of our society, that top 1% of our population makes $360,000 or more per year, and they have the capacity to make big gifts. And they have the same criteria as any of us do. Do I know what's going on? Do I have a personal relationship? Am I involved? So just spend a little bit more time. My coworker, Daryl Prater, is just such a brilliant person. He was doing this, and it was about this time frame, getting involved in May for a December campaign. And he just suggested to the pastor, can we do this research? And then can we just start engaging those people? And the pastor said, sure, why don't we have some dinners in my house? Great idea. So we just worked our way through those top 100. The agenda just was, I want to give you an update and ask your opinion. So the pastor shared what was going on, had a question or two for input. And I'll be darned if after the first dinner, a gentleman came by the parish office the next day with a check for $100,000. There was no ask for that. But he was just so touched that he and his wife discussed it afterwards, and they decided to get caught up and share some of their blessings with the parish. $100,000. That made everybody's day. And it made the capital campaign a smashing success as well. We actually increased annual giving by almost 20% before the capital campaign, just based on this. Very simple and really kind of fun. The next thing you can do let me go back for a second. Who should be in that top 100? We can help you if you want to do donor research. There's some firms we can connect you with. It doesn't cost very much. But I live in Kansas City, and the biggest basketball program near here is KU. Currently they're in trouble, but they're always in the top 10. And they're wonderfully entertaining basketball. And we had a member of the parish who's giving $100,000 a year to KU and $25 to the parish. Well, we just did this little bit of research and found their name was listed in the KU annual report of gratitude, thanks to donors. And that just made us think, well, perhaps we should involve them and get them engaged and invite them for a few things. And it did work. We indeed, they were very generous, and it just took a little tiny bit of work. Okay, next bullet. Stewardship education. Start that today. Start that with lay speakers. Put something in the bulletin every Sunday, and I can give you a free cut and paste. Sign up for the stewardship system. Once a month, have a lay speaker. Do something to thank everybody for the past donations and volunteering. You could do that in your annual report. Start now planning out your sermons and announcements related to stewardship. Get your mail, email information all ready, and begin a system of personal engagement so you work your way through the entire congregation. So you've got personal contact before Commitment Sunday. There has to be an ask. There has to be a Commitment Sunday. But if you're normal, only half your people are going to abide by that. So what do? Well, we better pay attention and know who those folks are, and follow up with an ask that honors them where they are and what their concerns might be, but let them know that they have been missed, okay? And that we need their engagement. The follow-up, it's a lot of work, but it is totally worth it. All right, now here's a pledge card that I like. Okay, so do have a pledge card, and look at the details on this. It's not generic, it's tailored, okay? Jane Doe, address, envelope number, current giving. So remind me, how much did I give last year, or how much did I pledge? Now what's missing from this is right next to the current annualized pledge, I would put a box so I can check a mark, okay? And there's a little bit of science here too. The second from the bottom box is the one that is most frequently checked. So I like having 7% there that is within grasp, and let me just check a box. That way I don't have to go over to that left side that requires me to write it in. But I could just check a box, sign it, and turn it in, okay? And I would, you know, that third line up, I will pay my pledge by automatic debit from my bank account. I would make that bold, underlined, put some graphics around it to let people know this is very important and I would like to do that, okay? Another thing I would do differently is I would restate my ask on here. And tithing is 10%, only 5% of the population actually does that. I think your comfort level is to ask people to consider giving 5% to their church for the year ahead. Nobody seems to complain. The average person gives 1%, maybe 2% of their income. We want to make online giving super easy. So your pledge card should direct them to the website where they can make an online gift. This is from Church of the Resurrection, one of the largest, most successful Methodist churches in the world. And boy, is giving easy. You could click on the website. It takes you right here. You put the amount. There's an option to make it recurring. It is really important that you do 3A, okay? 59% of all gifts to churches right now are done by a card. Could be a debit card, could be a credit card, but it's a card. 59%, and that number is going to grow. And I think the reason why it's that way is because giving by a card gives you miles, and it's another layer of protection if there's any fraud. So please offer that. Make that just super easy for giving. Okay, 3A, do giving by card. Of course, you want to set up a bank transfer, so that's easy. PayPal is a system that people are very comfortable with. And the future, we haven't figured out how to make it work, but the future is going to be Venmo. People who are age 40 and younger, they just do everything by Venmo, just transferring back and forth. Text to give is actually kind of waning. So we're kind of, I think, post-peak on that. You need to offer that option, but it's no longer a big time. Item number 4, give people an opportunity to give a one-time gift and just be done, and call it that, and go back to it. And during that giving opportunity, always have a box to make it recurring. Okay. How much is this going to cost me? If you're doing a capital campaign, you're going to spend $5 to $10 per family. And it's going to be campaign materials, newsletters, food, hospitality, thank you. In an annual campaign, you should budget 2% of your entire expense budget for your stewardship effort. And this comes from a survey of growing dynamic churches done by the International Catholic Stewardship Council. They're professionals. It's a very academic, data-driven study that really revealed what's it take. 2% is kind of the minimum threshold. Now, if we were going to compare churches to the secular nonprofit world, that number is dramatically different. Were this a school, a museum, an art gallery, the YMCA, the Red Cross, their annual giving costs are 10 times more. They're going to spend 20 to 30% to raise that same money, 20 to 30%. So we have a much better return on investment than our secular counterparts. But my problem is I can't hardly get anybody to spend the 2%. So please take a professional approach to stewardship. Spend a little bit of money. Now we're coming to the end of our presentation, and I want to pause and just make sure that we're covering questions. Let me click on the questions I've got sent to me. Well, here, good. How confident are you about the expense projections you just covered? I am very confident, and it's been my normal experience to work in a church to see where somebody is raising more than $1 million per year, and they're spending $2,000 per year, and they can't figure out why annual giving is flat. And I think that's kind of like a farmer who's mad about the number of seeds they have to buy. You got to buy the right amount of seeds, or you're not going to get the crop yield that your land could produce. So I would say adhere to professional standards. And there are two resources that I really like. George Barna in the Protestant world has a whole ton of research on how to increase giving. In the Catholic world, there's a guy named George Zeck. He's the guy that wrote Why Catholics Don't Give, and then a corresponding volume, Best Practice in Church Stewardship. And they kind of are the same. They talk about the same exact topics. I learned a new word from George Zeck. It was obfuscation, and he used it in describing how most churches present their finances. So don't be obfuscative. I remember I learned that when my oldest daughter, who's now graduating from high school, when she was in preschool, she was 4 years old, and we would give her a word of the day. And I remember when we taught her the word obfuscative, and we sent her to school with this command. We said, ask your teacher, Miss Sally. Say, Miss Sally, could you repeat that? Your instructions are obfuscative. Well, we may have to get her to repeat about 20 times, but when she did it, she came home, there's a note pinned to her chest. And poor Miss Sally did not know what to make of a 4-year-old girl who used obfuscative in a sentence. That was a highlight for me, the nerd. Okay, other questions. Let me click over to the chat button. What else are we missing, Meredith? Tell me more about stewardship. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I know we covered a lot in this webinar. We covered our 7 principles of growing a culture of generosity, which I think are really the foundation of everything we do, including annual stewardship campaigns and capital campaigns for churches and parishes. We talked a little bit about some of the trends and moving to electronic and online giving. I'm just wondering if, with everything that we presented today, if you could say for a church, what are your maybe 3 recommendations that you say, start this now. If you don't have it going on, spend this time where, you know, we're going to be getting back into the church buildings. We're going to be seeing our folks again for the first time, hopefully soon. We're getting into the summer already, and fall is going to come really quickly. What do you recommend that folks start now?
Well, you're asking a really good question. So how do we ever prioritize anything in a sea of information like this? So this is our agenda, and I personally would do number 2 and number 3 on our agenda here. And I would do my research, you know, who are members of each of these different strata. And I would start engaging my saints right now. I'd find a way to invite their involvement and communicate and ask them to volunteer, even if it's an episodic basis. Now, and on the 3rd item on this agenda point, I would get to work on my mailing details to get that in shape, because just, you know, if you don't meet somebody where they are, they're going to miss your message. So we've really got to get our game on and get our database up and going. Once those two things are in gear, I'd go to number 4, the communication system, and just gear up and be ready to be very smooth with video, email, text, announcements. And in the future, you're going to have an app for the church. So you might as well start investigating that right now. I'm working with a church in Batavia, Illinois right now, and they're just exploring what do we want in our church app. I think they're brilliant. They might as well do it right now, because that is the future for all of us. So you asked the question, what's the first things to do? I'd say 2, 3, and 4. And you can get on that today, and that will guarantee. Our goal is always increase annual giving 10% every year. You get on top of these items, and your giving will go up 10% this year. I'm just sure of that. Now, for more information, join our stewardship system. Go to church-development.com, sign up. You get free information from us and a blog, you know, every couple of weeks, and it's a ton of information. You can just download and use our annual campaign system. It doesn't cost anything. It incorporates all of this stuff. Now, I know you got to go. People saying that they're going to bail out on me. My phone number is in there. It's on the slides. Call me. Send me an email. Meredith can help. We've got a bunch of people within church development who are experts in this area, and it is our life mission to help you in the church world. So if you need help with your annual campaign or a capital campaign, don't hesitate to call or email at any time. Thank you so much for joining us. Go forth, good luck, and God bless. Bye-bye.